Senator McDonald. Senator Singh.
I rise to contribute to the Modern Slavery Bill 2018 after a hard-fought campaign by a wide range of stakeholders that Labor has listened to and responded to. The clothes we buy and the food we eat in Australia is often imported or includes imported parts, and many countries from which it is sourced do not benefit from the labour regulations we enjoy here at home. Indeed, new research published in the journal Nature Communications found that fishing crews all over the world are working excessive hours for little or no pay in horrific conditions. Modern slavery is real, it is pervasive, and it is everywhere. There are more people in slavery or slavery-like conditions in 2018 than at any other time in human history. Many of these are children. The International Labour Organisation has estimated that about 168 million children worldwide are engaged in child labour. Two-thirds of the 45.8 million people trapped in slavery worldwide are in the Asia-Pacific region. Many of them are stuck in the global supply chains of products and services Australians use every day, victims of exploitation in private sector activities like manufacturing, construction, agriculture and fishing. Even in Australia, an estimated 4,300 people are currently trapped in slavery or slavery-like conditions. They are migrant workers, international students, backpackers, women, people working in our horticultural industry, our convenience stores, or for labour hire companies. As a nation, we rightly find the notion of slavery abhorrent. It conjures images of subjugation, pain and fear. As a society, we know this is unacceptable. Modern slavery is the worst abuses of humanity by humanity. We are all shamed by this shocking reality. Modern slavery harms people of all ages, genders and races. It deprives people of their autonomy, their freedom, their potential and their dignity, and it harms their physical and mental well-being. 80% of the 75 million people who make our clothes are women between the ages of 18 and 35. Often these women live in poverty, suffer from exploitation, verbal and physical abuse, and work for as little as the equivalent of 40 Australian cents an hour. That is why a number of countries, including the UK, France, Netherlands, have acted with legislation to curb the rise of slavery in business supply chains. And while this modern slavery legislation introduced by the government is welcomed, it is indeed very much overdue, and it does lack the teeth contained in models adopted elsewhere. The lack of an independent anti-slavery commissioner or adequate penalties makes it a lost opportunity to identify, prevent and mitigate against adverse human rights impacts broadly and child labour in particular. Its major legislative omissions will substantially curtail the success of the implementation of this Act. No person wants to purchase goods tainted by slavery. No business wants slavery in its supply chains. And with this legislation, turning a blind eye to allegations of slavery will no longer be an option, and that is a very good thing. Legislative change in Australia has been the culmination of advocacy across a multitude of sectors by people dedicated to ensuring human rights in Australia are respected. And it should be no surprise that it has been Labor that has been very much supportive and listening to that sector and leading every step of the way. In 2016, I initiated an inquiry as part of my role as Deputy Chair of the Joint Parliamentary Committee on Law Enforcement into human trafficking. It ended with key recommendations to prevent such instances and provide support to victims. This was then followed in 2017 as part of the Joint Parliamentary Committee on Foreign Affairs, Defence and Trade with an inquiry into establishing a Modern Slavery Act in Australia. The committee held public hearings in Mildura, Melbourne, Sydney and Canberra, and its recommendations were consistent with those of the Committee on Law Enforcement's inquiry into human trafficking. The committee found that there are serious gaps in the way victims are identified and supported, as well as the ways our criminal justice agencies cooperate to bring perpetrators to justice. Particularly concerning were the reports by stakeholders of serious misconduct in overseas residential institutions and within Australia, particularly in the horticulture and labour hire companies. For example, in Mildura, the committee heard from Mr Turaga of Fiji. He had been promised the opportunity to work in Australia, earn a fair living, the opportunity to study and the ability to send money back home to his family. Instead, he had his passport taken upon arrival. He was told he had to pay back a debt associated with the cost of him coming to Australia. He was forced to work over 12 hours a day, and his wages had not been repatriated to his family. Further investigations revealed that this kind of exploitation was not isolated. The committee heard that such passport seizures, wage theft and violations of even the most basic workplace health and safety laws had become a business model for labour hire companies. As a result, the Foreign Affairs Committee's report recommended a series of changes to the way Australia's victim support programs operate, including the introduction of a national compensation scheme, improvements to how victims are supported in the visa process, the delinking of this support from criminal prosecutions, and the introduction of a national labour hire licensing scheme. The committee listened to stakeholders and recommended the establishment of an independent anti-slavery commissioner, the introduction of global supply chain reporting requirements and penalties for their breach. The committee also made a series of recommendations to improve coordination and training for Australia's law enforcement and criminal justice agencies. Labor supported these recommendations. In fact, the recommendations were in lockstep with Labor's policy to introduce a Modern Slavery Act in Australia, announced by the Leader of the Opposition and Shadow Justice Minister Claire O'Neill in June last year. Labor's Australian Modern Slavery Act includes supply chain reporting requirements for major Australian companies and the establishment of an anti-slavery commissioner. A Labor government will enforce supply chain reporting requirements for all major businesses, ensuring that no Australian company is either directly or indirectly engaged in modern slavery. Major Australian companies will be required to comply by reporting annually to the government with a slavery and human trafficking statement detailing the steps they've taken to ensure that modern slavery is not occurring in their business or their supply chain. Each statement must include specific information about the company's supply chain, where risks have been identified in that supply chain, what steps are being taken to ensure slavery is not part of that supply chain, training provided to staff on these matters, and whether slavery has been found in the supply chain and what action has been taken. The list of companies in Australia who are required to report under Labor's Australian Modern Slavery Act will be publicly available. A central repository of statements will be established, and there will be penalties, most importantly, for non-compliance of the Act. Labor will also establish an Office of an Australian Independent Anti-Slavery Commissioner, recognising the importance of this role in ensuring the effectiveness of the legislation. So a Labor government, unlike this government, will introduce an independent anti-slavery commissioner to monitor and scrutinise the government's work in tackling modern slavery and help address these gaps in enforcement and victim support. Key stakeholders, including ACRAF, Anti-Slavery Australia and the ACTU, have joined Labor in the call for the establishment of such a role. Labor's Commissioner will work with victims of slavery to receive inquiries and complaints. Labor's Commissioner will assist business in building and improving best practice in protecting their supply chains from the taint of slavery. And Labor's Commissioner will work with civil society to help prevent and detect slavery in Australia. Labor's Commissioner will lead Australia's global efforts to fight slavery, including working with other countries and international organisations. The legislation before us does not achieve any of this. The government's decision to reject an independent anti-slavery commissioner in favour of a business engagement unit shows that their primary concern, unfortunately, as always, is in protecting big business. The absence also of civil penalties in this bill is baffling. Leaving companies to police themselves has not been effective in any other jurisdiction. The banks didn't do it, neither did the insurance companies, and companies aren't doing it in the United Kingdom. Evidence provided to the Senate inquiry into this bill showed that in the UK, where there are no penalties, the percentage of businesses that have reported still hovers at around 30% of those that supposedly have had an obligation to do so. That is not good enough. Conforming to the law cannot be an option. It is important to achieve the right balance to ensure companies are encouraged to undertake best practice and scrutinise their suppliers to ensure that they are also compliant. Regardless of size of all businesses have a responsibility to ensure they are not trading in the misery of modern slavery. And that's where penalties will ensure this. Penalties should include a civil penalty provision for failure to report with an immediate start date, focused on the fact of reporting rather than the content of the report, to give business time to build compliance procedures and gain familiarity with these new requirements. A civil penalty provision for submitting an inadequate report with a delayed start date of 2 years from the date at which the bill receives royal assent, and a requirement that the minister report annually to the Parliament on the companies that have failed to comply with the Act. Stakeholders who provided evidence to the Senate inquiry into the bill also raised a number of further concerns, including the threshold for reporting. The reporting requirement in the bill will apply to entities with consolidated annual revenue of more than $100 million. Some stakeholders have called for a lower threshold of $25 million to align with ASIC's definition of a large corporation, or $50 million, which is close to the United Kingdom's model. Labor is committed to reviewing changes suggested by stakeholders to the Senate inquiry, including the threshold for reporting, as part of a 3-year review provided for in section 24 of this bill. The clandestine nature of modern slavery makes it very difficult for authorities to detect, investigate, prosecute incidents when they occur, wherever they may occur. Victims of modern slavery are often incredibly vulnerable and face cultural, social and economic and language barriers. There are also significant gaps in the support services we provide for victims of modern slavery. Modern slavery acts are similar legislation are currently in place, as I said, in the UK, in France, the EU and in some states such as in the US, such as California. A Modern Slavery Act will encourage businesses to take every step that they can to put pressure on suppliers and notify authorities, as well as ensuring that they are more careful about checking who their suppliers are and what kind of labour practices they're engaged in. So despite the shortfalls before this bill, it is an important piece of legislation and this parliament needs to enact it for the best interests of our community and the communities elsewhere in the world. Vigorous consultation with stakeholders, including NGOs, the business sector and departments, have made clear modern slavery is an issue which needs to be dealt with immediately. I want to sincerely thank all of those stakeholders that appeared before the Law Enforcement Committee, the Senate Committee, the Joint Foreign Affairs Committee, that made submissions, particularly the Law Council of Australia and its former President Fiona McLeod, ACRAF and Christine Carolan from there, Walk Free Foundation, particularly former Senator Chris Evans, the Salvation Army Freedom Partnership, particularly Heather Moore, who has worked tirelessly on this issue, Stop the Traffic, and I acknowledge Fuzz Kiddo and indeed the petition that was received by Senator Penny Wong and our Shadow Justice Minister Claire O'Neill on the 13th of November, signed by tens of thousands of people from around the world, calling on this Australian Parliament to be a global leader against slavery by enacting a strong and effective Modern Slavery Act. I understand that Fuzz presented that petition to Senator Penny Wong and to Ms Claire O'Neill on the 13th of November, and Fuzz, as the National Co-Director of Stop the Traffic, was doing so as a response to members of its Australian Coalition, which represents over 30 organisations working together to prevent, disrupt and abolish modern slavery. Stop the Traffic has been actively engaging with members and senators, I understand, on all sides of politics, as well as with business, industry and non-government organisations and consumers on this issue of a Modern Slavery Act for Australia. That petition that Senator Wong presented then to this place, to this Senate, was signed by some 52,719 people from around Australia and the world, coordinated by Freedom United. What it said is that it commends the Australian Parliament for taking bold first steps towards creating a modern slavery law that could greatly impact the lives of millions of people working under conditions of forced labour. It went on to outline how we know all too well the many workers in Asia enduring forced labour to bring us, as I said, the garments, the foods, the electronics and the other goods we enjoy. I very much am pleased that Senator Wong presented that petition to this Parliament, and thanks Stop the Traffic for presenting it to Senator Wong to do so. There are many more, of course, that have fought for this legislation to end slavery for many years, and there is no doubt that this legislation, limited though it is, will drive corporate change and will have a positive impact on countries around the world. It will create a framework for business, government and civil society to address modern slavery. I do want to congratulate members throughout this Parliament, particularly our Shadow Minister, Ms Claire O'Neill, but also the Chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee inquiry, Mr Chris Cruther from the other place, and indeed my Senate colleague, Senator Linda Reynolds, who I got the pleasure to work closely with on this particular issue, and I share her passion and understand how passionate she is about this issue. But the work is not over, and Labor is not ready to stop working. We will ensure that we are doing all we can to fight this horrific practice, rather than leave the job half done. We do not accept modern slavery in any form, where in Australia, in the Indo-Pacific region or anywhere else throughout the world. We do not accept slavery in the supply chains of companies operating in Australia, which is why we must legislate to ensure that the tragic stories that we have heard are never ever repeated. It is abhorrent to me, it is abhorrent to so many in this place, the fact that in this day and age, 2018, we are still having to deal with issues of slavery and slavery-like practices. But the reality is there is modern slavery within our communities and indeed within our region. It is real, it is pervasive, it is everywhere. We must stamp it out. We must end this practice. It is abhorrent, and I commend the bill in front of us today and hope that it can be improved upon in time to come.
Thank you, Senator Singh. Senator